Well, it's been more than 6 decades now since the rise of Beatlemania, which is, of course... You're watching France 24. We are going to be crossing now live to the French city of Toulon, where Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz are speaking at the 25th Franco-German Council of Ministers. Take a listen.
And to also have so many members of the German government who have been working for the Franco-German summit, alongside their French counterparts. Yesterday in Brégançon, we had a conversation together and with our teams in attendance, a long discussion. It was quite a friendly and fruitful conversation that we're able to have, and here is the 25th Council of Franco-German Ministers. And then shortly we will also have the Franco-German defense ministers meeting along with various representatives of the armed forces. What we have been speaking about is what we call the Franco-German reflex. Since the 7th of May, when you attended Paris on an official visit, that's when we started talking about many items together, and this is just another step in that conversation. Chancellor, we have been able to come to a number of decisions which will help bilateral and European agendas push forward. We will be able to have greater competitivity and productivity in Europe. We've been able to see eye to eye on a number of items. We will be able to bolster European security with defense measures, which we're going to expand in just a few moments. 8 documents, shared documents, were finalized. 20 projects, key projects, were also finalized as part of our bilateral efforts. So working together on the Franco-German reflex is quite important given the international stage, and we were able to meet with a number of our colleagues over in Washington. We were able to reassure Zelensky of European, long-term European support for Ukraine. We strive for peace. The Ukrainian president strives for peace, and over the past few days, with attacks on the rise, it is now more important than ever before, especially over the past few months, that we strive for peace, because the Ukrainians are being hard hit, and we have seen the gap between all of the positions, the official positions, after summits, international summits, and facts on the ground. The coming days are going to be so essential as we reach the end of the period that President Trump and President Zelensky were able to agree to come to an agreement. We will continue putting pressure on for further sanctions to be made. We are going to implement further sanctions. The United States of America also will implement sanctions to try and force those concerned parties to come back to the negotiation table. We were able to also speak about the Near East, and we were able to speak at length about what is happening in Gaza, how it is intolerable, it is unbearable to watch what is happening. We have seen the drastic outcome of the humanitarian blockade. Fighting must come to an end. Humanitarian access and aid must be guaranteed, and we need to ensure that we are embarking upon a political path towards peace with all stakeholders. We also need long-term peace for Israel, for the Palestinian people, and it can only be achieved through political means, a two-state solution. We also spoke about short-term solutions, and I would just like to say how the Chancellor was quite brave in ensuring certain weapons will be able to be used in Gaza, and I welcome that decision. And today, it is now a priority to focus on the future. Our foreign affairs ministers made a joint decision, again with UK representatives, to take a very firm stance against Iran for the nuclear program to not be started up again. And we want Iran to uphold their promises And we want the snapback mechanism to be implemented so that we can enter into serious, transparent discussions. Unfortunately, that is not the case for the time being, but this is what we hope for. Our Minister of Defense and Security, the Summit for Defense and Security will be an opportunity for us to cover many more points, which we're not able to cover today. Our joint effort to have long-range missile capacities, an early warning system, a joint early warning system, but also we'll be able to reiterate the importance it is for us to have strategic equipment, such as future-proof tanks and weaponry. It is up to us to bolster the current programs that we're already working on, think of future programs, and I would like to thank all of the ministers and their teams for the work that they've been able to do. Another major item that we were able to discuss, and this ties in with security and defense, was the acceleration of our competitiveness program in our respective countries, but also within Europe, because it has been highly reported on that competitiveness in the European Union is failing. It has been highly reported, a drop in GDP per capita, a drop in competitiveness compared to the United States, compared to China. So we need to take action. And there are a number of ways in which we can take action, and this is what we've been looking at specifically over these past few weeks, and which we're able to speak about at the Ministerial Council. In terms of energy, we need to ensure the principle of technological neutrality is upheld, and we need to ensure independence for low-carbon energies. This is a major step forward, but it is a way for us to reduce costs, ensure supply, and achieve our climate targets. Having technological neutrality is essential, and in doing so, we will be able to ensure sovereignty, competitiveness, and a carbon-free energy sector. Our grid providers and operators are entering into a vast survey to look at what is needed to make sure that we can provide enough energy for people while also channeling investment into the right areas. And we need to make sure that all European nations are on the same page, because Europe wasn't built on a single energy market. That's what we need to now do. We need to right the wrongs of the past. We need to ensure that France and Germany are on the same page so that Europe will be on the same page. In addition to all of these topics, we feel that this is very important given the current trade climate. We need legislation, we need digital sovereignty for Europe. There's no doubt on that, no matter what people may have been saying in the press recently. We need to be able to diversify partnerships while still ensuring greater European competitiveness and ensuring fair competition. Our two countries are going to be able to coordinate efforts as part of our lead-up work to the G7 and also as part of the recently created task force, so that we can have a clear vision of relations between China and Europe. And we were able to discuss the early stages of that report this morning. We also want to ensure fair trade, and therefore we want to ensure a preference for European products from critical industrial sectors. This goes through public procurement policies first and foremost. This is what we are working on at the Franco-German level, but also at the European level, and we agree that we want to put to the Commission the same form of carbon schemes at borders so that carbon measures cannot be worked around. And we feel that this is a fundamental work that our ministers are working on. We also have We also discussed considerable work coming from the Commission for the energy sector, chemistry sector, the chemical sector, the automotive sector, and we are going to finalize a roadmap for the automotive sector before the 12th of September. Franco-German convergence is a way of us having clear decisions being made before the end of the year, and we will have monthly update talks with our respective ministers so that we can all make considerable headway on all of the items that I've just mentioned. Coordination between France and Germany is a way for us to ensure digital sovereignty, economic competitiveness for state-of-the-art technology. This applies to the space sector. Both countries have been working on rockets, and we've been working with the European Space Agency as well, the Space Summit, which will be held in France next year. And we have also been talking about the upcoming multi-year European plan. We want to focus on quantum computing, semiconductors, AI, and the list is long, but the long list of technological innovation. In terms of disruptive technology, our economists provide us a fantastic report which lays the path forward, and we can start to implement key work because we're going to have a joint mission for Spring Day, and France will have its own similar project. So it will be a way of having BPI France and Spring Day working together. So France and Germany are also working together on a high-level summit on the 18th of November for digital sovereignty, along with the European Commission and a number of member states and economic representatives and other stakeholders. This is a vast agenda that we have ahead of us, but it is a way for us to strive for greater simplification. That's why it's a very important roadmap that we've been talking about and discussing these past months. We want to free up the burden on our companies, and there is a clear message for the European Commission and the Parliament that we want to push, because there are certain regulations that are highly awaited, and it will be underpinned by our joint roadmap. Both of our countries are also working together to ease up savings in Europe so that we can have a capital market union. This is something that our respective ministers spoke about yesterday, and we want to finalize work on the initiative so that we can also have greater securities, European certified securities, and a task was given to our respective ministers to look at the regulatory framework which would be required for startups so that we could scale up more startups in Europe. In addition to all of the economic initiatives to bolster our position and drive growth in Europe, we also spoke about how France and Germany can converge more by having more socio-economic reforms on the same page at the same time. So we will continue talking about that together. We had on the 1st of July a summit in Berlin, which was one of the first of its kind on it, and I would like to just thank all of the French and German representatives for the work that they've been doing since then, because it is that which is going to help us bolster productivity, support for the youth, for the elderly, unemployment benefits. These are fundamental underpinnings of both of our economies, and we need to make sure that we are working on the same page for all of these items. We have a lot of support from economists on all of this work, and they've been working tirelessly over these past few months. Our ministers have already been able to take into account some of the fundamental reports that have been given to them and take on board some of their proposals. There are many other Franco-German initiatives that we've been talking about. For example, for the cultural sector, we decided to take Arte, which is a Franco-German platform, to take it European and work more on Deutsche Welle. So these initiatives will help us increase the amount of Franco-German work being done by creating joint content but also by fighting together against misinformation, which is undermining our very democracy. Second, we also decided to ramp up bilateral cooperation for immigration and security. There are some very concrete programs in place, but immigration, we spoke about it as well, because quite clearly we have a joint agenda. We need to better protect our borders. We need to have greater coordination with countries within the Schengen zone. We need to implement the Immigration and Asylum Pact. And we also have a number of clear items which both France and Germany agree on. We're able to sign a number of agreements, which we also signed in terms of the employment sector to support our younger generations for cross-border workers, to make it easier for people to work between our countries. And I would like to just acknowledge all of the work that people have been doing on the ground. Thank you very much for your attendance. I don't want to take up any more of your time because I've already taken up a lot of your time, but and let me just finish on this. This is just one meeting of many meetings that we will have as part of our ongoing conversation between France and Germany. This shows just how we are both convinced that our countries are facing vast challenges, but because we have a deep-seated friendship between our nations, between our teams, between our staff, we are going to be able to overcome these challenges. France and Germany can be more efficient, more effective, with stronger economies, safer countries, and we will be able to reach that goal thanks to all that we have been talking about today. So we have concrete projects, thanks to the work we've done together, and I think it is with all of your support between now and all of the dates that we have in our respective agendas. We'll be meeting in Evian soon, then we'll be in Berlin as well for the Digital Sovereignty Summit. But in the meantime, we also have multiple dates in our agendas where we can meet. So thank you for your presence, and Frederick, thank you for coming, and thank you for mobilizing your entire government to be here. Emmanuel Macron, President, thank you very much. On behalf of the federal government, thank you. Thank you for such a warm welcome in such an amazing venue. Thank you for your hospitality. I will now continue in German, if I just may. Last night, we were able to enjoy a fantastic dinner as we prepared for today. We have a very clear view of the challenges that lie ahead, that we must overcome. We were able to talk about the importance of prosperity. Prosperity needs to be achieved despite the fact that the world is changing so very fast. We have a shared determination to prevail, to overcome these challenges, and that is what brings us together. We have a strong Franco-German friendship within European borders, a strong, united Europe. But we need to look at reality face on. We will have to work together to try and change that reality for the better. And that is what we have been talking about here at Toulon. And that is what guided all of our conversations. A few weeks ago, we were with Keir Starmer in Washington, where we were able to defend our European vision. Just last week, we were in Moldova with Donald Tusk to talk about our vision of Europe, to talk about the vision of European youth. In June, we agreed to bolster European competitiveness and to reduce red tape that are a considerable burden on companies. But I would like to thank all of our ministers and their staff who have been working tirelessly to prepare today's meeting. As you said, there are a number of key points. We need to make Europe strong, economically strong. We need to make it a country where people want to work, want to invest. And for that, we need a paradigm shift. So we both need to work together. We need to strengthen our internal market, the domestic market, within Europe. We need to reduce red tape, and we need to do it as soon as possible. Companies based within the European domestic market need to be able to operate within a framework which is easier and more streamlined. We're talking about some 450 million consumers that they need to serve. There are numerous initiatives that you mentioned, Franco-German cooperation, and these initiatives will be essential in the coming weeks and months. For example, we spoke of the opening up to new technologies while protecting the environment. We have to strike a fine balance. We need a stronger Europe that has greater capacity to produce its own technology. In November, as you said, we will meet again in Berlin for the summit on digital sovereignty. It is a key event where we'll be able to ensure greater resilience of our economies. We also spoke about how we wish to both invest in the aeronautical and the aerospace sector so that we can have a Franco-German push to further work on space-related technologies. There was discussion about work that we can do on the hydrogen-based technology, work that can be done on the supply chain and on raw commodities needed for that innovation. We also spoke about how we want to have a more in-depth and a more intertwined and interconnected single market, European market. We had some fantastic conversations over these past few weeks on that point. And out of that, we can say that we need a stronger, united, more prosperous Europe. France and Germany will be able to work together to play the role where we can push Europe to get to that state. We will have a Europe where the big and the small will work with each other. But on top of that, we need to give Kiev clear signs to show that we are on the same page, to show that we agree and that we can work together. So this is a way of showing Kiev, for example, that we will continue to provide them with support and with training. France's diplomatic forces, military services, will be used as part of the volunteer coalition. Moreover, we're going to continue to work to make Europe safer. And this is why, in just a few minutes, we will begin the Franco-German Security and Defense Summit. We need to have clear, open conversations about safety within Europe, but also about the safety and the security of France and Germany. So our respective ministers will continue this conversation this afternoon. Together, we will prevail. We are not going to step in and replace NATO. The Franco-German friendship and alliance is something which can go hand in hand with NATO. And this is a fundamental idea to bear in mind when talking about various forms of military assistance and cooperation that we can work on, especially when it comes to our armament. As President Macron said, we will meet again in Berlin before the end of the year. We have a very clear agenda ahead of us, some clear dates, and we will stick to our agenda. We're going to ramp up Franco-German cooperation on everything that we have said this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, as the world is changing drastically and rapidly, France and Germany need to work hand in hand. We need to work tirelessly for Europe to be safer and to be competitive. I would like to thank what the presidential office has done with us over the past few months, and we are glad to see that we are headed in the same direction. Allow me to finish by saying that politics is a matter of individuals, not institutions. It takes time for people to meet together and talk face to face. And this is what we have been doing over these past few weeks. And I would like to thank France for having given us their time. Because thanks to that, we were able to cover so many very important topics, and I was able to personally meet with various ministers and get to know them, which is such an unconditional and essential part of any true alliance and cooperation. The Franco-German alliance has been in place for many decades, ever since the horrors of the first two world wars. But the linchpin of our friendship is that we have a shared sense of responsibility. We are truly aware of what that responsibility is, which is why we took the time to meet yesterday and today, why both of our governments were able to take time and meet and continue to deepen Franco-German cooperation. Thank you very much. A question for the Chancellor. You spoke of the Franco-German reflex, but when it comes to nuclear energy, there is some doubt. Would the German Chancellor be okay with the funding of nuclear facilities using German money?
Support for Ukraine in the face of the continuing attacks by Russia. What will that mean in concrete terms?
Es gibt in der Energiepolitik unterschiedliche Grundsätze.
As you know, there are different ways to look at energy. There are different stances and positions that various countries can make, which is the case of France and Germany. We have agreed to converge our energy policies, as was just heard. The energy grid will be put to debate or discussion with European partners so that we can push the future. We will continue to discuss these matters within the German coalition. We understand that we have differing points of view, but there's no point for that to ruin the Franco-German friendship. All forms of carbon-free energy are very important. And in Europe, we have the target, we have competitiveness, we have sovereignty and climate targets that we need to meet. Let me just say that we have certain deadlines that we have to meet within various parliamentary calendars. There are key deadlines ahead, but we also have an agenda that we need to meet. There is a vote that will be held in the upcoming, very soon, in the French Parliament, and I don't want to impede on that upcoming vote. But there is a general state of affairs that everyone needs to take account of. In France and Germany, you have very different political life, but that has never stopped, in the past, the Franco-German partnership from moving forward. So you are asking me about a hypothetical of what it's going to be like in the next 20 months. But we have multiple roadmaps, and with these roadmaps that we are agreeing to, that will lay down the road forward for France and Germany to work together in the coming months and years. Our ministers have had some very interesting conversations. In France, we've had some lively debate of late. What we need is determination and stability. That's what we need. As for Ukraine and the ongoing support of Ukraine, given the current context, there are multiple aspects to it. We need diplomatic support so that Ukraine can be truly part of the negotiation. There is no negotiation without Ukraine. And we went to Washington to try and ensure security before we could have negotiations on the ground. We will continue to provide military support through training, equipment and capabilities, which will continue in the short term, in the coming weeks, but it is also our ability to ensure long-term sustainable peace. And the only way you can have that is with peace guarantees. And that is why back in February we created the Coalition of the Willing. And in just a very recent hours, we've been able to look at the contributions of all nations. There are now 30 nations part of that coalition where we've been able to say and see who does what. So we need a strong Ukrainian army. It is currently the largest army in Europe, so we need to know who is going to be willing to train it, to equip it, and to finance it, and how. Then we need the reinsurance forces, the backup forces, and that applies for the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army. And we need to look at what can be done in the neighboring countries, and we're currently finalizing all of that in the coming days, along with the Chancellor Merz and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And with President Zelensky, we'll meet again, some in person, some remotely, to talk about the coalition. They're willing to look at what the heads of the armed forces can do so that we can have something clearer by the time we get to the next deadline that we already have in place.
Well, we just heard then from Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz at the 25th Franco-German Council of Ministers, which of course gathers the French president, the German chancellor, and most ministers from both countries for discussions on priority policy issues. Now, the two hailed agreements on numerous fronts, notably 8 shared documents that they finalized, in addition to 20 key projects, as well as a part of all of those bilateral efforts. Now, among the domains of this reinforced cooperation, defense, the two saying that they will be working together on an early missile warning system initiative, the war in Ukraine, notably by providing more air defense systems to Kyiv, space technology, and then also on economic matters, including digital sovereignty. For more on this, France 24's international affairs editor Douglas Herbert joins me now on set. Hi, Doug.
Hello.
So there was a lot of talk about cooperation, partnership, strengthening, but, you know, there's a reality behind that, which is that one of these sides needs the other more. Who is that?
And so you want me to get off the fence and say which one? Look, if I had to say, I would say probably Macron right now needs Merz more than the other way around. Doesn't mean that they don't have a slightly mutually dependent relationship right now, that vaunted Franco-German engine. But, you know, look, we're sitting here in Paris right now. The government is on the brink of collapse. In the next 10, 11 days or so, it's all but preordained that this government is going to fall, and that's going to force Macron to very abruptly turn his attention inward to domestic matters and more significantly to finding a new prime minister, to finding a new government with a lot of uncertainty over whether his own internal domestic situation is going to remain it can be put back on track or on a vaguely stable footing. So he is right now not on precarious footing. He is on quicksand. The ground is sinking under him as he holds this important meeting with a key international partner. Now, needing someone more. Macron has been, and he has made a point of, if he was going to define his legacy, it is being a president who has been extremely out there on every front, constantly reiterating the need for closer European cooperation, integration at a time where other Europeans have sometimes faltered and not been as proactive. He has repeatedly insisted the need for Europe to come together, to the point ad nauseum. Some people can't stand it. They're sick of him. He just won't stop talking about it all the time. But that's where he stands. But in order to be heard, if his voice is going to be audible at all on, forget the world stage, on the European stage, if he's going to be heard, he needs the strength of Germany. Because while Germany is hardly in a good financial fettle right now, like France with its mounting debt and deficit, Germany is is right now in recession. Its economy is right now doing very, very poorly, and the Germans are extremely frustrated with that. And Merz is also in a situation where he's a relatively new chancellor, still trying to cut his teeth and still trying to prove to his fellow Germans that he has what it takes, and their patience is limited. So these are not extremely popular right now ministers back home. They both approach this meeting on a fragile domestic footing, if you will. But you're asking me who needs who more, and I would say I'll put the money down, I'll put the chips down on Macron, relying more at this point on Friedrich Merz. Now, that said, you are perhaps forgiven if you roll your eyes when I use the words Franco-German engine, right? The French-German engine. How many times have we sat here on this set talking about it? The two leaders just now referred to their first meeting when Merz just became chancellor back in May. And they had a meeting, and what were they talking about then? They were talking about the need for the Franco-German engine to be rebooted, how vital it was for France and Germany to reset Europe, reset the EU. Why? Because if they're not working and marching together in lockstep with a unified vision, they're not going to be able to ensure the security and the competitiveness and the unity of Europe as a whole. These are big words, and you can sort of forgive other Europeans if they look at these types of summits and say, who do those guys think they are? At the end of the day, yeah, France and Germany remain the heavy hitters, the biggest economies, the biggest military powers in the European Union. And for that reason, we keep talking about the Franco-German engine, and we will keep talking about it, because in a world where, as they kept repeating today, huge economic challenges, huge security challenges. You mentioned those defense initiatives announced today. They are more than ever marching in lockstep on Ukraine. That is the one area where, for all their divergences, they are both in favor of unwavering support for Ukraine, even if the mechanisms and the modalities of that support are different from one country to the next. But at the end of the day, we could be sick of talking about the Franco-German engine ad nauseum, right? But at the end of the day, it does remain a thing. It does have relevance, geographical relevance, geopolitical relevance, and in a Europe of 27 members where everyone's sort of often divided and looking in their own corners and out for their own interests, to have two of these leaders coming together and at least making the show of trying to show they're making an effort to converge on these big issues, it matters. I was saying this yesterday. Symbolism matters. When they went earlier this week, these two leaders, to Moldova, and they stood there with Moldova's pro-European liberal president, Maia Sandu, we were saying that the fact that they just showed up, along with the Polish president, Donald Tusk, the fact of these three European leaders simply standing there on that stage with the Moldovan president of this tiny country, the symbolism matters. Easy to roll your eyes at it and say, come on, what are these leaders going to do? What difference does that make? But that's the message they're sending today. They know they have their work cut out, but they also think that for all the cynicism people can naturally have, perhaps be forgiven for having over these meetings, they think it does matter, and they think perhaps not just does it matter, but it's more important than ever at this particular juncture in time.
Now, speaking of that, Doug, you mentioned one of the rare areas where both sides agree is on the war in Ukraine, but the facts of the matter matter still haven't changed, one of which Friedrich Merz admitted for the first time, actually ever really openly earlier today when he said that it looks pretty obvious to him now that there will be no summit between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. So they might be united. How might that affect things on the ground, if at all?
You know, Merz absolutely said that. He has, I would say he's God in religion when it comes to Putin and Russia. He sees it with a lot of lucidity, as I would have to say I think Macron has. Since those round table meetings way back early in the, on the eve of the Ukraine war, where Putin was trying, Macron was trying to continually call Putin, get his ear and everything, he's come a long way. I don't think Macron has any illusions anymore about Vladimir Putin. He's also really hit hard in his words and in his deeds. He's tried as well. But I will say this right now. With respect to their stance on Ukraine, they are together in the sense that they know that they need to continue to materially support Ukraine in its efforts to fend off, to defend itself against Russian aggression. That is, if not to drive back the Russian invader, at least to give Ukraine everything it takes in order to give it the best chances on the battlefield of at least maintaining its positions to come eventually to a negotiating table in the strongest position possible. Where Merz and Macron, by virtue of their countries' histories and cultures and their difference, obviously, where they beg to differ is while Merz might be inclined at some point to send German soldiers as part of some eventual peacekeeping or reassurance force is the term being used. They're not using peacekeeping, but reassurance force after a peacekeeping deal to Ukraine itself. You can imagine there's a lot of debate and skepticism in Germany itself. While Germans are very much in general in support of Ukraine, behind Kiev and behind Merz's determination to help Kiev, whatever it takes sort of position, they are not ready to deploy Germans to the battlefield. It's actually, Germans are not even eager to enlist in the army. It's hard to, conscription is a big, hot debate in Germany as well. So the Germans have a much more standoffish, for obvious historical reasons, much more tepid, standoffish relationship when it comes to military matters and especially deploying their own soldiers to foreign territory. So, yeah, they agree on Ukraine and supporting it, but they don't agree on the modalities and the mechanics of what would happen after a peace deal and where soldiers might be deployed.
Similar case for places like Spain and Italy that we also heard
yeah.
a lot from on that
Good
matter
point.
similarly this week. Douglas Herbert, thank you very much.